Have you been stressed, anxious, or worried? Have you felt pangs of loneliness in recent times? Are you longing for greater connection with others in the world around you? In a phrase, are you looking for happiness? You are not alone. Millions of others are seeking this feeling of spiritual, mental, and physical wellness too. This podcast explores the underlying causes of unhappiness and shares with us the secrets of rewriting the frequent thoughts and redirecting the common behaviors that keep us in that state. Join forensic psychologist and best-selling author Dr. Neehall and her guests as they dive deep in the realm of psychological wellness and explore ways of finding happiness on demand.
Well, listeners, hi everyone. It's Joan Neehall again on our podcast, Happiness on Demand. I'm so excited to share with you today my recent find. I met this woman, Denise Beagley, at the Evolution of Psychotherapy just a couple of months ago, and I was so impressed with her sense of humor, her knowledge, and her delivery. So I guess we're in for a treat, but let me give you a little bit of the lowdown on who she is. Denise Beagley, M.Sc, is the founder of Beagley Consulting. She's an associate director of crisis and justice systems at Banner University Health Plan. Plus, she works part-time as a crisis intervention specialist for the Chandler Fire Department in Arizona. She serves as an adjunct faculty for the Office of the Courts of Arizona Probation and Crisis Intervention Team. She's also a faculty associate at the Arizona State University School in the Faculty of Social Work. Now, her course catalog is amazing. I recommend that you all take a peek at it because I did, and I was so impressed. Let me tell you a little bit about it. Her course catalog spans motivational interviewing, training listeners, leadership series, to verbal de-escalation during crisis intervention. Now, isn't that amazing? So without further ado, Denise, let me pass the spotlight on you. Welcome.
Oh. Thank you so much. We need more people like Dr. Neehall. So thank you so much. I'm just excited to be here. And when I met, Dr. Joan in LA, it was an immediate connection. I feel she makes you feel really at ease. So I appreciate that. And I'm just excited to be here and chatting with your audience. So I know I've got things in my head, but I don't know if you want to start us off, or this is my first podcast, so I'm excited to.
Fabulous. We're talking about happiness, Denise, and just to jump right in, I thought I would ask you your spin on happiness, given what you're doing with the fire department elsewhere. And listeners, let me tell you a little bit of gossip. This woman was also teaching in Ghana. So go figure, right? She's got a lot to tell us. So let me be quiet and ask her to talk.
Yes, I had an amazing 2023 and got to go over to South Africa in March and Ghana in May. And I will talk about that. So for me, I think being a first responder and working with other first responders, I've been teaching under that umbrella of public safety since 2004. I started out teaching crisis intervention teams. And then I got into teaching firefighters in 2014. And it's a little bit different, right? A lot of times we just kind of look under that umbrella of public safety, but you have to tweak and change the way you teach to engage your audience, as you know. And I think one of the things, though, that I found as commonalities is that they do take a lot. They don't necessarily. I think now there's more awareness, but back then there wasn't as much awareness about compassion fatigue and what they were taking on. And it's an occupational hazard. And so, the combat to that is living a life that you love outside of your job. And so I really do try to strive myself even to practice positivity and live with intention. So what do I do each day with intention? And I find that helps me stay positive myself. And then it's that old adage of putting the mask on yourself so you can help others. And that's how I can help, other people connect with resources. I'm not doing direct therapy. I'm in a different role. And so I find people like yourself for them to go and connect with and get the proper help that they need and deserve.
So you just hit on a chord with me, my vagus nerve, if you will. When you talked about compassion fatigue, can you tell us a little bit more about your experience with that? Because there's also something in the research that's talking about empathic distress. And experience that blah feeling that people are feeling today?
Absolutely. And I was just watching, I've become a fan of yours and watching your podcast and your different interviews that you've had. And I think we have this real low, it's a 50-year low of people being unhappy. And so how do we reconnect people with that, right? How do you get some excitement? And so that's part of it is when I talk about compassion fatigue, it's under that umbrella is burnout, is vicarious trauma, is secondary trauma, is, everything in your new terminology, right? When you think about it's all the same thing, but it's how is that person absorbing it? And so I really think it's like we're new elastic bands when we start out in our field, and over time you can stretch that elastic band and it goes pretty much back to what it was, but over time it can stretch out and not be what it was or snap. And so how do we help people stay happy and healthy even though they're doing this amazing work? You can only take on so much, because I kind of talk about like whether you shop at Home Depot or Lowe's, it's a 5-gallon bucket and it fills up, and you can fill it, all the negative stuff, or you can have a combination of things, but you have to dump that bucket out in a safe place. So whether you have a coworker you can talk to or a professional, you have to dump it and get it off of your chest. And I'm also a critical incident stress management instructor. And so that's another piece is after an incident, talking about it within the research says within the first 72 hours is critical. And it's that was one thing I actually talked about to people in Ghana was, I actually taught the compassion fatigue over there, and, it's not as common that you would talk about your problems in public. And I think that also is a correlation between the public safety community. They are less likely to want to talk about it because it's seen as, maybe it might be seen there's stigma. There's, we look at that population as they're the first responders. So who's 911 for 911? And I do think it's important for us to dump out those negative emotions so we can process and, stay happier in our lives.
I think that's very important what you're bringing up, because you talk about the metaphor of dumping. And I love that metaphor of dumping, because half of the time the stuff that we hear through social media or wherever is misinformation anyway.
Yeah.
And it's designed to stress us out, and in a negative way, to create distress, because you have that feeling of a loss of control. So I really love your metaphor of dumping. In other words, you're telling us that what we need to do is to take control. Limit some of this stuff that we take in vicariously, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, I tell people it isn't like if someone keeps running, they run on patients, and it's the same patient, maybe cycles through all the different shifts, right? Or they see them frequently.
Yes.
The position that as the first responder, you're not responsible for what happened in this person's life. And they're struggling because all they know is the resource to call 911. So we come in as crisis interventionists and are helping them. We're all together part of the puzzle. A doctor isn't going to do open heart surgery, or the doctor would do open heart surgery, but they wouldn't necessarily have been there transporting the person to the hospital, right? We all have a role to play. Just as if I was doing first aid and doing chest compressions, I'm not doing the open heart surgery. I'm not a doctor. So we all have a role. And the other piece of that is what's been going on in this person's life isn't our responsibility, in the sense we don't have to take the entire burden of that. I think that's another thing that I think people are feeling they have this burden. And when that burden gets too heavy, particularly first responders are more likely to die by their own hands than in the line of duty. And so we have to be very cautious and careful of letting that go. Like I said, it's an occupational hazard in the caregiving. No matter if, I think pre-pandemic, they said 65 million Americans were taking care of a family member, and they weren't taking care of themselves. Like, how many of us could say, we've postponed our own personal appointment, a doctor's appointment, a dentist appointment, because we had to take care of somebody else. And so that's another part of it, right? Is that we have to make sure we're taking care of us so we can do the good work and continue that. But we do need, like, I encourage people to have a work spouse. And what I mean by that is that person has your back, right? They've got Tylenol, they got a coffee or a cup of tea for you. They can vent with you. And I know it sounds crude to say dumping, but it is dumping and letting it go. It's not bringing it back in your bucket. We can only have so much bandwidth and space for things, and we try to fill those with the good. Because, we probably all have experienced something in our careers where we could ruminate and think about it, and it could really ruin our day. But I choose, every morning we make a choice, right? I look in the mirror and I say, if I say today's going to be a bad day, today will be a bad day, right? I'm willing that to happen to me. If I say, I know I have a lot to do, but I'm going to take it as an opportunity for myself and I'm going to enjoy it, it's going to be a much better day. Also, you could say, I've never seen a mirror I didn't like, so you can feel free to use that one as your affirmation. But yeah, I think it's important, our attitudes and living with intention. And I feel like there's a lot of crossover between the work that I've heard of yours and what I try to emulate out there too when I'm talking to folks.
You've got a big heart, and I love that about you. Guys, can you see the heart that she's got?
I do.
It is Valentine's coming on, and Denise is right in there like a dirty shirt, and I love it. And the thing is that when you use the word dump, my sense of humor got the better of me. And you talk about having a good dump. And I was
thinking, you can't do that when I'm drinking a tea.
Well, maybe you should. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You stopped doing the coffee. Okay, fine. But my sense of humor, guys, gets the better of me. I'm thinking, yeah, that's a healthy dump. And maybe they need to understand that to have a healthy dump, you need fiber. To have the fiber in your system, maybe you need to establish boundaries. And I think that's such a crucial point you just brought up in the metaphor of a dump, that we need to demarcate boundaries. I love that idea of a work spouse, someone who you can connect with, who can keep you grounded. But in addition to that, I think boundaries and being aware of your limits. And I think that's what you're talking about too, is that it's important for us to know, okay, this is my bit. I can do this portion. Now someone else needs to take the ball and go with it, and that's hard.
And it lifts the burden off of the caregiver, right? Or the provider, because we can't do everything. Like we'd be living each other's lives if that was the case, and we just can't do that. And that there's that ownership for that person. So I teach on motivational interviewing, and that's critical, right? It's you're not making choices for people. You're kind of laying out a menu of options. Sometimes if someone clearly says to you, I have no idea what to do, that is so tempting for us to want to go fix it, right? We're like, ooh, I'm going to fix it. But if we do that, we basically are showing the person, here's the fish, not teaching them how to fish, right? We need to be able to allow that person to live their life. And it's so important if you don't have a work spouse, I'm going to tell you, start courting somebody. All right. You got to work on that. That's your homework. Because and that also gives you some delineation between your work life and your home life. Because when you go home, sometimes you just don't, like, I remember my dad, working all day, come home, and my mom was excited to talk to him about his day. And he would say, I just don't want to postmortem on it. It was a bad day, but if it was a good day, he'd want to talk about it. And so understanding those boundaries, I saw how my parents were, and my mom would know, okay, well, I made your favorite dinner, or this is going on today. And, it would help lift his spirits, right? That my mom saw that as part of her her work, working in the home, was to help my dad also, kind of shift gears and be present when he was off work. So
That's brilliant what you're just sharing with us, because what you're talking about as well is you're hitting a nerve with me, because we're talking about couples now. And, the issue is you come home, you're tired. One spouse invariably will say, talk about it. Let me hear about your day. But then if you had a work spouse, to use your metaphor, then you can leave work at work and come home and be present for your family. And
yeah.
that I think is really crucial.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we are the same person, right? In that sense, we can't have it too compartmentalized, because they both I guess not interfere is a good word, but they kind of influence the other, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. And for us to say, separate your lives totally is impossible. In fact, that would be really setting us up for failure. So if we can look at it in a different way, with a different attitude and a more positive, like to practice positivity, it really helps us look at things in a way where it's okay for us to have a bad day sometimes, right? It's okay for us to have emotions and let that out. We're human. You can't do this work without it. Yeah.
Also, to be happy, I underscore the point that we have to be unhappy at times. We have to embrace all that life gives us, some of which is terrible. But happy people, the research shows, know how to bounce out of it, and so they can connect with other people. And you're right. I mean, you come home, you're still the same person, but you can ask. I can't talk about this right now. Can we talk about it later? But you've decompressed as well, so that you can focus on what's on the menu to use.
Yeah. As a kid, I loved Mr. Rogers. And so I with no permission, of course, from his estate, I just said, I have a Mr. Rogers theory. And that is that when we engage with work, we have, what did Mr. Rogers do when he came into the neighborhood? He would take off his blazer and his fancy shoes and put on sneakers and a sweater, I think that his mother knitted, which is adorable. And he would engage with his audience, right? And they would have in the land of make-believe and do all that. But then when he'd go back to work, he would put back on that suit jacket and those fancy shoes and go about his day, his work day. And I kind of try to create that for myself. What's my threshold? More difficult when I have some of my jobs, I work at home. And so I have a 3-story house, and I have my office is on my 3rd floor, and my kitchen is on the 2nd. So I almost physically have the steps as my threshold. But when I go and do the work, like for Chandler Fire Department, or go out into the community for Banner Health, I wear different clothes and I represent myself in a different manner. I wear a uniform for Chandler. I have my business attire for Banner. So you're able to kind of shift gears that way. And it's useful. So I don't know about you, but I love it when plans cancel, because I get my jammies on and I have a cup of tea and I can read a book and it's all is good, or watch some Netflix. I think Netflix, we're missing an opportunity. I just want to say with Netflix, have you ever been watching something and Netflix will say to you, are you still there? Like, have you been binging something?
No.
Oh, yeah. I think it's an opportunity for them to do like a check welfare, like, hey, are you still there? Have you eaten? Have you, have you taken a shower today? Right? Things like that. So you'll have to watch. Clearly, you have not been a couch potato enough to sit there and get the the message.
What you're sharing with us is psychological flexibility. That's what you're teaching us right now. And I love that, because what you're telling us, and I do the same thing in my work, so it resonates what you're talking about, is the ability to flip, to move with what's in front of us, to be aware of our limitations, and then to seek help if necessary.
Absolutely. And a lot of times people come to me and they'll say, but I'm not suicidal. And I said, and you don't have to be. I use the analogy of our vehicles. Do you get your car serviced? Do you get an oil change? Do you rotate the tires? And I go, yeah, I do that. Why don't we do that for ourselves? It's preventative work, And so, to talk to somebody, you don't have to be at the level of, I'm feeling like I'm going to end my life. It's, that I need to talk to somebody because I'm not enjoying things like I used to. I don't find joy anymore. And when we're losing that joy, that's when we really want to reach out and talk to somebody, you know?
So we're talking here about your being an advocate for mental health. And I think that's so important because you're also saying that there's still a stigma, and you're right. And post-pandemic, I've noticed that in my research that my numbers for depression and anxiety have risen exponentially.
And we're seeing that is exactly what the trend is. I see Chandler as like a microcosm of the rest of the state. And my calls would domestic for a little while. We had a dip in domestic, for about a month, and then it rose up again. So domestic violence, domestic disputes, depression, anxiety, not only for adults, but particularly for children, adolescents. And that, unfortunately, I think we're number one in the world for depression. So what does that say, about our society? We've got to look at how are we seeing things, and how can we put, even sometimes it's looking at with a different lens, how can we appreciate someone in a different way? So yeah, I love kind of looking at that, giving yourself permission to let go of some stuff that really doesn't belong to you anyway. And again, to mention motivational interviewing, it's lifting the burden. Like someone asked me, "Oh, do you teach a class on decision making?" And I said, "Yeah, it's called motivational interviewing." And it's going to lift the burden off of you and give it to the person that it's their life. Because we got enough on our own plate, and if we can help navigate for others and get them to a space where they can then start doing that themselves, and then they own their success as well, right? That is huge. I don't know about you, but I'm sure you've had clients say to you, or patients say, "Oh, it's all you." And it's like, as nice as that is, this is yours. Like, this recovery is yours. You've been the one that is doing this. I've been here for to alongside of you, but it's fascinating what you've been doing for yourself. So that's part of it. I think, I have a friend who I've been kind of just, as we counsel our friends sometimes, but she's been suffering and she always looks at the past. And I've been really encouraging her to enjoy the present moment. Like if she's hanging out with friends and family, enjoy that time. Don't think anticipatory stress, right? Oh, I have to do this or I have to do that. In fact, changing our have to do's to I get to or I want to even has a psychological impact on us. And so that's again, that practicing positivity. It's small little tweaks and changes to how we speak. I did that even with police and fire. They would say they would deal with a patient. And I'd say, what can you imagine going home and saying, "I will deal with you later" to your loved one versus "I'm working with a patient"? It makes a big difference in our attitudes towards them and how they see us.
Absolutely. And the overarching theme of self-compassion, because we tend to guilt ourselves if we take care of ourselves first. And I say, this is what I teach, if you can't take care of yourself, how can you be compassionate towards others? So start with yourself. Start doing something like taking a walk out in nature in the pouring rain and tell me what you notice with your five senses.
Yes.
Or before you eat a good meal, look at it with your five senses. Do we have to do this right away? Can we just pause, put a pause in it and look and smell and sound and what's in crackle? Oh, that's French fries. All right. No, I'm Pavlov's dog. I'm salivating. But, getting people in touch with the five sensory modalities that we're gifted with and experiencing what Dasha Kelter talks about when he says the experience of awe. Or being able to be aware that we can suffer from post-traumatic growth.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We can suffer from it. We can be ingenious survivors, put our hands up like that and say, it's like a marathon, I run and I won, and I am experiencing growth and not just across the belly. All right. I'm actually growing.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. And it changes. I think it's being present. It's like you said, your senses, connecting with that. not just taking pictures of all of our food, but actually enjoying it, slowing down.
That's just one sensory. Well, I mean, the hands too, I don't know, but just the sensation, all of this. I mean, they
Smells.
have it right. When they eat, it's not manja, manja, but they're stopping and they're looking and they're tasting, and it's fabulous.
When I lived in Ireland, I mean, you would get a table in a restaurant for the night. It wasn't just for an hour. Like here in the US, we have a tendency to get you in and get you out, right? And we eat faster. Whereas in Europe, the lifestyle is a little bit more laxed, and you have conversation and, enjoy your food. And I think it's actually better for you as well. Your system will appreciate it far more than if you're wolfing it down.
But that's a very important point, because it comes back to what I was talking about with Toby just a week ago, namely connection.
Mm-hmm.
We need that connection. It's in our DNA. Okay.
Yeah.
If we can't have connection, we're going to be falling prey to the epidemic of loneliness.
Yes.
And it's huge. I mean, you talk about Ireland. Theresa May discovered and created the Ministry of Loneliness way before the pandemic.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think that's what we're seeing is when I would talk about communication, we have poor communication, our relationships go away, right? And we have breakups, whether they be friendships or romantic relationships. And so that connection and communication, I'll hear from somebody, they'll say, oh, well, I texted that person one time and they didn't get back to me, so I'm not going to reach out to them again. Well, who knows what was going on in that person's life at the time? I said, reconnect, try to see what's going on. Maybe they need you right now, and you need them, obviously, because it's on your mind to connect with them. You miss them. And sometimes it's hard for people to acknowledge that, that I need that level of connection. So yeah, those are things that, for me, I try to disrupt our negative thinking, right? And I try to focus on the positive. When I went to school in Ireland, I was called Pollyanna. One of my professors there, and I said, I don't see it as a negative. I really do try to live most of my life in the positive. Have I experienced some difficult things? Absolutely. And there's a time and a place for me to experience those. But I really do every day try to act with intention of how I can make one. My family taught me, my parents were like, if you find something, you want to leave it better than the same or better than it was, right? Before you came into its space. So I try to apply that to my life with people as well and the work that I do.
And you're a very good example, actually, the personification of resilience, because your life has not been a simple one, but you've learned what Tedeschi and Calhoun talk about, post-traumatic growth, that you've embraced the negatives and you've been able to reframe them and become a better person. It's transformed you and your progress through life. So on that happy note, we will have to end. But
that was so fast. That was amazing.
but that's what happens when you're having fun, I think. Yeah. And that's what it's all about. But I want to express my profound appreciation to you for sharing your nuggets along the way with us.
Well, thank you so much for thinking of me to be a part of this. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining this discussion on happiness. We hope this helps to inspire you to lead a more joyful life. To dive deeper into the subject of happiness, be sure to check out Dr. Neehall's book, Happy is the New Healthy, available as an ebook or hardcover. For additional resources, visit our website at drneehall.com. Until next time, stay happy.